And Mr. Durkin, it's good to see you here today, and I listen to interest in what you have to say, and I want to thank you for your contribution to the Good Friday Agreement, because I think we sometimes forget how much it has achieved as well, and how far we've come in a quarter of a century. Now we're obviously the Good Friday Agreement Implementation Committee, so we focus a lot on what hasn't been implemented as well, and I think these discussions are useful on that basis to look at how we may move those things forward as well. And so I suppose also I think we need to be mindful of how much things have changed in just the whole landscape, the political landscape and the landscape in the north. Most recently, the census, there's no longer a unionist majority, and you have Michelle O'Neill as the designate First Minister. So all of those things have changed, and what we need to do now. And I listened with interest in your discussion in Talkback the other day as well, around the referendum and the preparedness for that, and I think you referred to that in your statement, around the necessity to plan and to prepare for where we're at the moment. And I think and you'll have got this from all of the island and indeed from the diaspora, there's an appetite for people looking to the future and the constitutional future of the island, and again the need. So we and many other politicians and civic society indeed have been calling on the Irish government to set up a citizens' assembly on Irish unity as an appropriate citizen-led initiative to discuss the constitutional future of the island. I note in your own contribution as well, you were talking about, and I completely agree with you, an open process and bringing in different perspectives and getting people away from fixed positions. I see as late as Monday night, Donegal County Council as well have passed a motion. It was a Sinn Féin motion, but it passed with the support of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael around writing to the Taoiseach to establish a citizens' assembly as well. So I think there's a real appetite for that. And I think Frances Black is on here. She'll probably talk about Ireland's Future Together We Can event on Saturday. I think that's really significant in terms of, I think all of the political parties, all the political parties that are involved in that, and all the different organisations as well, and the diaspora. And there's also speakers from the unionist tradition on that as well. And the big ask from that is that the Irish government plan for the future and establish an all-Ireland citizens' assembly. Now, as this would be one of the most fundamental changes in our country since partition, how important do you think it is to provide that forum for people to contribute their views and to discuss what a new and united Ireland would look like, and to have an informed discussion, whether that be about health, about education, and all of the other issues that may be in people's minds about what things may look like in the future? How important to you?
Yeah. No, thank you, Deputy, for those points and questions. As I said in my statement, I think there is a really strong case for proper deliberative moves to create Article 3 of the Constitution. And Article 3.1, says it is the firm will of the Irish nation in harmony and friendship to unite all the people who share the territory of the island of Ireland in all the diversity of their identities and traditions, recognising that a united Ireland shall be brought about only by peaceful means with the consent of the majority of the people, democratically expressed in both jurisdictions in the island. I think the Irish government could, for instance, move to either revive the Forum for Peace and Reconciliation or something like it, and maybe needn't meet in as big a format or on a public weekly basis, but there certainly should be deliberative, well-framed, inter-party discussions. I believe something like that would actually be a helpful preliminary to the establishment of a citizens' assembly or anything else, because I think a citizens' assembly, when it's convened, will want to know if there is at least some established wavelength of thinking across political parties, the various parties likely to form government here in the north or whatever. So, like the Forum for Peace and Reconciliation, I think such an exercise can be open to all parties, north and south. Yes, not all parties may attend, but the terms of reference should not of themselves, prevent any party attending, because after all, the terms of Article 3, that language was accepted and agreed in the talks by unionist negotiators. Part of the balance for accepting the institutions in Strand 2 was that they also accepted the terms of the constitutional change in Articles 2 and 3. I know some unionists who will say that as far as they're concerned, the people of Ireland can be united even under existing arrangements. They would say, the people of Ireland, some unionist friends who say, well, the people of Ireland united to vote for the agreement, north and south, so it doesn't have to mean a unitary state for the people to be united. So people can have different views about what they would hope that Article 3 would lead to in terms of uniting the people. Article 3 was also carefully worded in expressing the firm will of the Irish nation. It was deliberately framed not to create a direct obligation on the state to be seen to be prosecuting for unity or pushing for unity, and that was to balance the provisions that were there on the UK government side about accepting it's the right of the Irish people to self-determination without external impediment. So just in the same way that the British government was saying it would have no agenda standing in the way of unity, the balance was that the Irish government couldn't be seen to be saying that the state and that every Irish government had to be pushing for unity, because if that nuance wasn't there, then unionists would say Article 3 wasn't really changing in the Good Friday Agreement. So for all sorts of reasons, there are live discussions about constitutional change, about the prospect for constitutional change, about what would be the necessary processes, just what are all the logical and logistical issues we would have to go through to even bring about a healthy, respectful debate. I mean, the fact is, the provisions in the agreement, where there is, some necessary collective ambiguity, or there was collective ambiguity at the time around some of the precise terms in terms of providing for a possible poll on the constitutional status of the North. It wasn't inserted into the agreement as a dead letter. I wonder at times when I hear some people say, oh yes, it's there, but no, we don't do it because it would somehow subvert reconciliation, it would somehow jeopardise the agreement if you even talk about those things. It's framed as though that there are two equally legitimate aspirations. So we can't have a situation where one of them is kind of told it dare not speak its name, or it dare not try to frame an agenda or express itself in any positive way. In the long journey to the Good Friday Agreement itself, it took all sorts of deliberative stages for people to get our heads around language and concepts and to be able to arrive at language that could be more shared and more commonly understood. It's going to be the same when it comes to the questions around constitutional status. I don't think we should be spending our time at the minute being fixated on asking the current British government for what the criteria would be for calling a poll. I'm glad, that we're not stuck with the Lewis test, the Brandon Lewis tests, or the Brandon Lewis doctrine as to what the criteria would be, because there would probably be ones that you and I would actually object to and have issue with. So I don't think we should be asking the British government to currently lay down ex cathedra grounds on which a poll might be called. We also have to be wise to the fact that the grounds in the agreement that oblige, the terms in the agreement that oblige a Secretary of State to call a poll may not be the only conditions in which a poll could be called. And a proof of that is The first political leader to call for a constitutional status poll after the Good Friday Agreement was actually David Trimble. In the spring of 2002, he actually advocated having a poll to coincide with the then scheduled Assembly elections for May 2003. And at that time, he made the point that the obligation on the Secretary of State is conditional and circumstantial, but it is not a general restriction that would prevent a poll being called and agreed on other grounds and on other basis. And similarly, you know, I recall a few years ago, Peter Robinson, in a speech in Queen's, talked about possibly that unions should maybe think about having a poll, but it would be possibly agreeing to a poll, but it should maybe be on a basis that, not as in the agreement, but a different basis, and that therefore the seven-year itch wouldn't be triggered, as it were, that it could be generational. So we have people thinking, we already have evidence of some people thinking outside of just the choice that a British Secretary of State would be obliged to make under the terms of the agreement. And I think it's healthy that the rest of us should be thinking about those possibilities. How can we create the prospect of having a debate where those who want to remain in the United Kingdom are putting forward their proposal positively and putting forward a prospectus with that, and those who want a United Ireland are putting forward their proposal positively and putting forward a clear prospectus with that? Because one thing we know from the whole Brexit nonsense is you don't want campaigns that aren't evidence-based, and you don't want people voting for outcomes where there isn't a clear prospectus, and people are free then to write and argue their own version of things after that, with all the destructive effects. So I think there is a duty for us to try to frame that debate, and that's why I deliberately used the point about curating Article 3, in taking steps to ensure that there is some duly diligent deliberations, I think starting with parties and then extending out then to citizens' assemblies and commissioning expert inputs. And I say citizens' assemblies because I don't think it'll be a one-off exercise. I think there will probably be a series of them needed to focus on different issues, and then parties will have to regroup and retune based on what comes back from those expert groups and those citizens' assemblies. It's a longer process, but it needs to start now. You know, there's no virtue in not preparing, in not planning. And this idea that I've heard some people say, oh no, you can't talk about these things until you have reconciliation. Well, what's going to be the test for sufficient reconciliation before you can have this debate? We also shouldn't be suggesting that those who want constitutional change are not as committed to reconciliation as those who don't want constitutional change, or that they don't see constitutional change as being the space in which reconciliation can be best fostered.
Yeah, thanks. And I've nearly